Our speaker tonight is Jeanie Reagan-Dinius. She is a cemetery expert from the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. She's expert on several other things for the DNR.
Know-it-all's a better fit, not an expert, I'm a know-it-all.
She's spoken to us before, but it's been a while.
Yes. Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. Can we get the lights down? Or at least the front bank, because this is all about pretty pictures. You can't do cemetery symbols. The front, at least the front bank.
Don't do the front bank.
That's good, because then that way people can see the.
I don't know where that. Okay.
All right, so good evening. My name's Jeanie. I am your tax dollars at work, so I hope when you leave you feel like your taxes are doing something worthwhile. I'm going to apologize. It has been a while since I've given this talk. So if I stutter here and there and have to think about what I'm going to say, I apologize, because if you've ever seen my talks before, I don't read. I talk off. I look at the screen. I know what I'm supposed to say. Well, it's been a while, so I apologize if I sit there for a second and go, yeah, because it's been one of those couple of years. So my job in the DNR is to locate every cemetery in the state. And so that's about size and shape of the cemeteries. But because I'm a genealogist, and I love history and I love cemeteries, as I'm going out there, I notice the stones. I can't help it, because it's just, they're amazing. And so what I'm going to show you is some things that I've learned as I've been reading, noticing, things like that. I will tell you symbols are what the presumed meanings are. And you can go online and find different websites that will say different things according to maybe a region of the country, or religious affiliation. So don't get so hung up on that, oh, I definitely think it means that, when someone else says it definitely means this. It's, it's one of those things, it's a lot of opinions. But there are some things that we know where society in general has agreed upon what a symbol means, and so we'll talk about that. So the first Europeans who come to this country are Puritans. If you've never read a Puritan books, ministries, pulpit stuff, they were obsessed with death. They thought death was going to get you, and it was going to get you good, and it was going to get you often. They're kind of obsessed with death. And it comes across on their tombstones. And so, and I'm going to use this word a lot, pop culture, the popular culture of early, what would become the colonies, become the United States, was the Puritan culture. And so even if your ancestor wasn't Puritan, if they were living in the colonial era, this is what they would have seen the tombstones are supposed to look like, and so it's what their tombstones may have looked like. It's also what they probably would have seen back home in the old world, and so you get a lot of similar shapes, a lot of the similar iconography, the symbols on it. So you'll see on this one, you get the hourglass, so you get like time is coming upon you, and you get the winged death, the winged skulls. I love these pieces, they're amazing. We don't find a lot of these in Indiana, this type of really morbid iconography in Indiana, just because of the time period. But again, we've got death right here. It's taking the body, putting a cap over a candle. It's going to snuff out life. So again, if you go back to Boston, places like that, this is on everything. It's part of the popular culture of this time period. Now, the first pioneers who come to Indiana are not stone carvers; they're farmers. And so our early stuff doesn't have a lot of the iconography on it, because we just didn't have the artisans to do it. These people were worried about getting crops to the ground, so we all didn't die. And so a lot of the early stones are on this material called wet stone, W-H-E-T, and it's the stone that the farmers found was good for sharpening their knives and their plows and things like that. And then they realized it takes a deep cut easily. And this is why you can still read them, because the cut is so deep that it's not been all brushed away through like acid rain, things like that. And so if it's a wet stone, most likely you can still read it, which is spectacular. And so while there's not a lot of symbols on this early on, do you notice that the shape of this stone looks an awful lot like the shape of that stone? It has nothing to do with it being better for the stone to integrity or anything like that. That's what stones are supposed to look like, because the popular culture says that's what stones are supposed to look like. And so you can start looking across a cemetery at just the shape of the stone and see the timeline of when stones are. So if someone told me someone died in, let's say, 1890, and they had that style of tombstone, I'd say no, they didn't, because that's an older tombstone style than you would have gotten in the 1890s. Okay? All right, so once we get our crops to the ground and we know we're all not gonna die, the first things that we do, one of the first things we do is set up churches. And along with churches is this church burial ground. So I'm gonna talk about some of the bigger groups that are here in Indiana. This is the Hebrew cemetery in Indianapolis. Just south of downtown Indianapolis, there are 9 Jewish cemeteries, starting from the earliest ones from the 1850s. This is one of the more recent ones of that. Now, I am not Jewish, so I had a rabbi work with me on this so that I could understand the symbols a little bit better. So, okay, I can figure that's a Star David. I got that one close enough. I can figure out that's Hebrew, marking at it. You get the menorah is very common. I saw this. Like, the heck is that? So that's the hands of Cohen, and it is a symbol, a sign that the individual can trace their lineage to the tribe of Aaron. It is a very kind of sacred thing. I asked the rabbi, I said, anybody ever lie? She's like, why would anybody lie? And I said, you've never been a genealogist. But it's supposed to be that this is a true heritage lineage thing. There is something special about that. So it's not something that can go on anybody's tombstone. And I just recently saw, because COVID, I watched a lot of documentaries, that Spock had the hand of this. That is a part of that, because he was Jewish and it was the hand of God. So I just learned something new. Yeah. All the things you learn on TV.
Nimoy was Jewish.
Huh?
Who was Jewish?
Leonard Nimoy?
Oh,
Yes, Leonard Nimoy, and actually William Shatner is also Jewish. But Leonard Nimoy used this because they wanted some kind of hand symbol, and he said, "I've got it." So, all right, something I've been told you find a lot of, but I don't find a lot in Indiana on the stones is for Jewish cemeteries is the lions. I had to go to Poland to find these, but I have found some in Chicago, things like that, so it's a common one there. This is also the Jewish cemeteries down there. I thought also that the density of the burials was a Jewish thing, because it's not, I don't find this in Indiana anywhere except the Jewish cemeteries. But again, went to Poland and found even the Catholic cemeteries there are heavily, densely populated like this. So I think it's a Central European thing. I've been doing some reading about some studies that individuals at this time period before they came over thought they were running out of land in Europe. And so one of the things they would do is dense people up in the cemeteries. So not necessarily a Hebrew thing. The stones down here are because part of Jewish tradition, you don't put flowers in the cemetery. You take a stone from the ground, you say your prayers, and then you put it on top of the tombstones. You'll see them on top of these tombstones here. And so they've just placed some there in the cemetery as a use for individuals coming and visiting their loved ones. But this is the Polish Catholic cemetery. So tight, just as tight. My poor husband, we go on vacation, and I have to do my studies so that I can, give you guys talks. All right, this is an Orthodox. This is Greek Orthodox specifically, but northwestern Indiana, you get a lot of this. So back in the day, the Catholic Church split. Half the church went with Rome as the center of Catholicism. The other half, the Orthodox, went to Constantinople, Istanbul as their center. That is their cross. So it's just a Christian cross, but of the Orthodox Church. And every once in a while, things pop up that I love puzzles. It was in Park County, so not too far from here. And I know that we are Judeo-Christian. We bury east-west. Head facing west, feet facing east, so when Jesus comes, you can sit up to greet him. And then your stones are on the west side of the grave. So you get these nice, neat rows, things like that. So I am in a little cemetery outside of Mecca, Indiana, and everybody's nice and neat, except for 3 in the very back, and they're cockeyed. They're different. So I go back to see, and I find this. Again, not Hebrew, don't speak, or not Jewish, don't speak Hebrew. Not Arabic, do not speak what I thought was Arabic. It turns out it was not. So we took pictures, tried to find every way we could find to read the stone. Turns out it's Farsi. Farsi was the language of the Persian Empire, So think of Iran, Iraq, that area, the Ottoman Empire. And this gentleman came over about 1910. He died in a tile factory explosion, and that's what in 1917. I'm fascinated by this stone for a couple of reasons. One, he found a carver to do the carving. This type of carving, which is raised letters, is a different type of carving than if you were to carve English and it's inset. He also felt comfortable enough to put his language on the stone and didn't think that anybody would damage it. So I'm just kind of fascinated by it. And all three stones are in Farsi. The other two are so decayed we can't read. The top part is all a prayer, and then the name is at the bottom with the dates. But you can't read the other two because they're so decayed. But we just get these hodgepodge of things, odd things in Indiana, and I love it. It's just so much fun. All right, so you get this. Short stubby cross is Catholic. I was raised Catholic. I have no idea why. I asked my priest. He looked at me like I had 3 heads. He's like, I don't know. It's just something I've noticed. You go into the Catholic cemeteries, we have short stubby crosses. If you go into the Protestant cemeteries, they're tall and leaner. The other thing is the carving on the cross. I have a friend who's a Presbyterian minister, and he said they don't carve on the cross as a part of their religious beliefs, or their ceremonies. So if you see carving on the cross, most likely it's Catholic, and if it's short and stubby, Catholic. If anybody has an idea why, I'd love to know, but I have never found any. Every once in a while I just start a search trying to figure it out, and I've got nobody who's given me an answer. It's just what I've noticed as I go around to the cemeteries. And then I want to say there's everybody else. I cannot walk into a Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian cemetery and know from the carvings on the stones, it's that religion. Because what they're doing is they're using symbols from the Bibles on the stones, and every group's using them. So it's not like only one group's using this or only one group never uses that, things like that. So your best benefit is to know your Bible, know your symbols from the Bible. That's going to help things make sense. So you might get something like this. That's the open Bible. Could be on top like this. I've also seen people reference this as the book of life. I've also seen people reference it as the book of death. So you call it whatever book you would like, and that's great. We talked about the anchor. So the anchor, you think of this would probably, if you're on the coast, maybe a Coast Guard, sailor. But this is in Monrovia, Indiana. There's not much big bodies of water anywhere near. But there is a verse in the Bible that Jesus is the anchor of my religion. So you get a lot of anchors on tombstones. You'll also notice those on some carvings on some churches and stained glass windows. But the anchor of this type is probably that because of the religious view. And then we get the angels. I love angels, they're my favorite. And so angels can do a variety of things. They can take your soul to heaven, or they can mourn for you. And so if you're poor, like this person, they don't have a very big angel, but their soul, the little baby there, the little soul, is going to go to heaven. Or if you're rich, you get a big angel to take you to heaven, and they'll take you up to heaven. The things about these bigger angels is that most likely they are carved in workshops in Bedford, Indiana. Bedford's limestone capital of the world. There are a lot of stone carving, early on stone carving workshops there, factories, whatever you want to call them. So they're doing the same angel over and over and over again. So you'll start to look at, they kind of look like the exact same person. It's probably because it's the same carver carving over and over and over again. Usually they're women. I've seen a couple of male angels, some of them are archangels and things like that, but mostly they're women who are taking your soul up. The other thing that they can do is they can mourn your death. Mourning angels are my favorite thing in the whole wide world. And there's a variety of different ways that they look, contemplative, crying, Egyptian, Greek kind of in their stance, but they are just beautiful things. This is in Greece, in Athens, and I love the artwork of it. I mean, you feel like you could just go up and pick up that piece of cloth, even though it's marble. And then she's my favorite. She's in Milan, Italy, and I told my husband that I want her on my tombstone, and he said no, and I said, then you'll go first, because that way I can buy her. but Emily's story will always have someone mourning her death, because there's a mourning angel on her grave. All right, and then we start to change. Society starts to change, the pop culture starts to change, and there was a book that was published called The Language of the Flowers. You can find articles in the newspapers of, ladies, hey, did you know that this flower means this? And so between all of these things, you start to get the different types of flowers and plants and things like that being on tombstones. So the ivy means like a long relationship. If it's a bud, it's a younger woman. If it's bloom, she's older. All different types of these stories about this. You also get the flowers that are at the funeral. So in this time period, we don't have very many funeral parlors, if any funeral parlors at all. And so the family takes care of the funeral, and you take care of it at the house. So you prep the body, you wash them up, get them in the clothes they're gonna be buried in. You might keep them around for a couple of days until family gets in for the funeral. And I'm gonna tell you what, after 3 days, you start to stink. And so the family brings in lots of flowers that to mask the smell of death. And it's some of the same flowers we send to the funeral homes today. And so that's what I think when I walk into a funeral home, the smell of the flowers are overwhelming because they no longer have to mask that scent, but they're still so bold. And so you get some of those also on their tombstones. And we get the willow tree. Sometimes the plants are also planted in the cemetery. So willow trees are very common in cemeteries. As a weeping willow, it's weeping, it's mourning for the death of everyone there. Evergreen trees are popular for everlasting life. So you get a lot of those kinds of things that are common in cemeteries. Then you get the lamb. That's not a great lamb because because they're limestone, they don't hold up very well. But it's whether they're engraved this way or they're sitting on top, the lambs don't last very well. Usually when it's a lamb, it's children. And the children can be an infant, newborn, up to teenagers. I've seen them into their 20s where they're still using a lamb, and it deals with Jesus and the Lamb of God, and innocence and things like that. And so if you're looking across the cemetery and you see a lot of little lambs in an area, it's probably some kind of a disease came through, childhood disease, measles, mumps, something like that, and you get an area of all the children together. Now I say usually, because every time I have a rule, someone has to break it. And Sophia Head, who was born in 1857 and died in 1901, she is not a child. Now, so why did their darling get a lamb? Maybe she liked lambs. Maybe she was childlike. Maybe she had some mental issues that she was childlike. Maybe it was the cheap stone in the store. I don't know. But for whatever reason, not every lamb's gonna mean child, but usually it does. All right, then we get crops. In the north, it's usually wheat. In the south, you'll get apples. And in South America, I have seen corn. It's all about what crops are mainly grown there. And it doesn't mean that person's a farmer. It has to do with a life harvested. So the person may have been a farmer, but that's not what the symbolizing. It's symbolizing that there was a life harvested, someone died. All right, go back to short stubby, Catholic. I know this because I'm in the St. Patrick's Catholic Cemetery. But the other thing about this I like is the pictures. These ceramic pictures that were popular late 1800s into the 1920s and 30s. They really went out of fashion in the 30s because of the Depression. Most popular themes of them are babies, brides, and soldiers. Usually they're on Eastern European and African American and Latin American. I don't find a lot in people, and that's just like back then. Today, lots of people have photos on their stones, but these early ones, it's just what I'm noticing. You go into the Catholic cemetery here, and she's Romanian, so kind of Eastern European, but I don't find much with the French Catholics or the Irish Catholics. I go into the Jewish cemetery. I don't find these pictures with the Germans, but I do with the Russian Jews. So it's not a religious thing, it's an ethnic country thing, and I don't know what it is yet. Still haven't figured that one out. But they're great pieces. If they are not damaged or vandalized, they hold up really well. Sometimes there's also a locket cover that will go over it that'll protect it even more. But they're just wonderful pieces. You get to see some ethnicity about the people, their heritage, their culture, who they are. I love his mustache. It's just so sweet. The other thing about it is that you find sometimes the pictures are the person in the photograph is actually dead at the time the photo was taken. So it's not that they've passed and that's why they're literally in their coffin. Sometimes it's because it's the only photo they had of the person. And there's a variety of reasons why. The ones that are really kind of depressing, a little creepy, are the children who have passed, and that's the only picture the family had of their child was the one taken after they passed away. Sometimes they'll actually prop people up and almost make them look like they're doing something, and that's a really creepy thing to me. But it's just like, yeah, that's like almost like they're reading or something, and you can tell. And if you're interested in death photography, there's a whole Victorian death. There's a great Facebook page that I share with you. I follow that too because again, it's what I do for my fun time. But there's a whole thing of taking photographs of this time of people after they died, this Victorian time period. So, but yeah, the ones propped up, it's like, yeah, person is dead, I think. So, yeah, you get there's certain things that I've now learned and that I'm looking for. So, all right, I get the hands shaking. It is a couple usually. I was doing a tour of a cemetery with a bunch of reenactors, and these are the people who go to the events and wear their glasses from 1850, and heaven forbid you wear glasses that were popular in 1851, kind of a group. And I said, it's a couple, and they're like, well, of course it is. And I said, why? You've said this. They said the cuffs are different, and one cuff is female and one cuff is male. And so I started looking at these, and I've noticed not only are the two cuffs different, the cuffs change style according to the pop culture of the time period of when these people died. So cuffs change according to when you died. So like this one, those cuffs are different than those cuffs. Different time period, different location too. This is South Africa, so it's a whole different culture. This is Dutch, the Dutch heritage. But just kind of a little cool thing that I never recognized before. All right, we have the pall. The pall is a cloth that goes over either the body or the casket, depending on the time period and things like that. Today is usually a sacramented piece of the church, so that you're not buried with it, but at the time you may have been buried with it. And it was the pallbearer's job to get the pall to the cemetery. We still use those phrases today. A pallbearer, they are responsible for getting the body to the cemetery. So we have found archaeologically people wrapped in cloth and palls and things like that. So that's what those are. All right, there is a state bird, a state tree, a state pie, a state bug. I think this should be the state tombstone. So I need to get a group of fourth graders together and do this. These are tree stump tombstones. They are made of limestone, carved to look like tree stumps. I say they should be the Indiana piece because they were made, and there were 7 workshops or 7 artisan factories, whatever you want to call them, down in Bedford, Indiana, where they were made mostly. And there are a variety of ways that you can get them. You can get them lying down like this, get some with some more symbols on them, standing upright. They are a reaction to the Victorian period. So the Victorian era is gaudy and big and thick, and think of Queen Anne homes and lots of color. And so there's a swing to the other way of more back to nature, the Adirondack movement, things like that. And in the cemetery world, the tombstones, it's the tree stump tombstone. So you get these pieces. But those poor people in DNR, I took pictures down to the foresters, and I'm like, so what tree is it supposed to be? Because it's like, well, is it a certain type of tree? I gave them several different pictures of different log styles, and they were different types of wood. So it's not one specific type of wood, lots of different woods. I have heard rumors, and we've pretty much proven that it's not true, that the number of tree stumps or limb stumps is the number of children that people had. But I mean, infant daughter, and she's got 1, so she had no children. And then this one's got 3, and I think on this person we figured out they had like 6 kids. So that's not it's a rumor, but it's not true. It's a myth, but it's not true. And you can get some pretty intricate, pretty detailed symbols on it. So just because it's tree stump doesn't mean it's plain. It's just different than the ones before with all the big mourning angels and stuff like that. All right, now, just because it's a tree stump does not mean that they are a woodman of the world. The woodman of the world, you can see it's here, is an insurance company that as a part of your policy, you got a tombstone as a part of your policy. And it would have the symbol on it. So it may have been a tree stump tombstone, but you definitely would have had the symbol on it. And like this one's just a piece of granite. There's no tree stump about the tombstone itself, but they are not the same thing. Woodman of the world still exists today. It's a Woodman of America, but you don't get a tombstone anymore with your policy. All right, and then you get the people who are going to spend the big bucks. They're not going to just go to the store or the funeral home to get their stone. They are going to go to a carver themselves. They're going to go to an artist themselves and get a life size of their loved one. So this is Corliss. Corliss is in Indianapolis at the Crown Hill Cemetery, and he was 10 when he died, and his parents buried him with his books, all of his little books up here. So I love life-size pieces. They're amazing. This is in Bedford. If you've never been to Bedford, this cemetery, the Green Lawn Cemetery, has a bunch of life-size because that's where the carvers were. We call him the golfer because we're very original. But I've seen pictures of him, and that's exactly what he looks like. So you get these amazing pieces of artwork that people spend a lot of money to get that taken care of, get that done. And this is my new favorite tombstone. I'm in Barcelona, and again, my poor husband, we're going to the cemetery. So I come around the corner, and I see this, and I'm like, oh, it's a mourning angel. Gonna take her to heaven, or him to heaven. And I get a little closer, I'm like, oh, that's not a mourning angel. And so this is him, this is the guy who died, and this is death. Look at that piece of artwork, though. It is spectacular. I'm going to Barcelona again in October, and I can't wait to go back and see this one. My husband's like, well, we've already been to the cemetery. And I'm like, we're going to go see it again. So, again, amazing artwork that you get in cemeteries. And the Barcelona one, if you ever get a chance to go there, has amazing sculpture. Just spectacular artwork that is just, again, floors me. All right, I'm gonna get to the soldiers. Things that are on the stone that tell us that it's a veteran or died during war, things like that. So this shape of stone is the government issued stone. So any soldier today who dies can get one of these stones. It's gonna be the shape of it. Today they're laser engraved instead of carved in like that. You can't tell from the shape of the stone what war they're in. You have to look at the engraving, the carving to see if it is. Except for during the Civil War, or after the Civil War, the U.S. government started giving stones to soldiers from the CSA, the Confederate States of America, and their stones, instead of being rounded, are a little bit pointed. So that's the only war that I can look at a stone and go, Civil War. But everybody else, you're gonna really have to look at what's on the stone and carved in the stone to know that. Up here, you get the GAR, Grand Army of the Republic. So the GAR, our boys came back from the Civil War and experienced a lot of things that they had never experienced before, a lot of tragedy, trauma, things like that. And I personally think they had PTSD. And one of the ways that they dealt with it is they bonded together and created the GAR. Think of it as like the VFW of the time period. So you had to be a soldier, a wife or a spouse of a soldier, or a child of a soldier to be a GAR member. And they had picnics and they had rallies, and then they became a voting force. Each community had a different thing. But the GAR on there means that person was a Civil War soldier. Now, the other reason I have this stone on here is what happened to poor Melinda? Yeah, she's his wife. Is she still alive? I don't think so now, but so there's a couple of things that could have happened to Melinda. Her family was too cheap to hire the carver to come out and carve her stuff on there. Maybe she moved after Iron died. Maybe she moved with her children. Maybe she had gotten old and moved to wherever her children are, and she's buried whatever city they're in. Maybe she got married again and is buried next to another husband. We don't know. But we assume that if there is a stone there, that the body's there. 99% of the time, it's a good assumption. but not always. We have to just be careful that, assuming that that's there. The only way to prove it is if you have documents that show when the day the grave was opened. Those are rare. So we have to go by the assumption that a stone with someone's name on it, that they are buried there. If you have a stone but no body, so someone was lost at sea, I've got ones of soldiers who died like in Normandy and then never came home, that's called a cenotaph. And so a cenotaph is a stone but no body. So it gives the family a place to come and mourn and to remember their loved one, but it's not going to be where the actual grave is. Okay? All right, so it's a Tuesday night in Crawfordsville in 1870. What do? You go to lodge. We were a lodge people. We loved our lodges in Indiana. There's a lot of lodges. So you get a lot of these fraternal organizations that you'll see some of the symbols on their stones. You'll see them in the downtown area. Well, your building right next door here is a Masonic temple, so that's a good example of that. But so you get these symbols on there that will tell about what fraternal organization they were part of. So this is the symbol for the International Order of Oddfellows. They are a group, IOOF. Their philanthropic duties, what they did was they buried widows and orphans. So you get a lot of Oddfellow cemeteries. Okay. KOC is the Knights of Columbus. This is the Catholic fraternal organization. You get the big boys on the block, the Masons. But what if you get this? TOTE. And you guys have this book in your library, and so you are very lucky. Stories and Stones. This book, there's a lot of books about symbols and who has what on stones and stuff like that. But what I love about this particular book is the last pages are abbreviations and what the abbreviations mean. Because I had never heard of TOTE, so I got this book and I looked it up. And it is the Order of the Eagle, which is a sub-branch of the Order of the Red Men. And the Order of the Red Men was a fraternal organization that they used Plains Indians garb, so headdresses and war paint for in all of their ceremonies, things like that. If you were a member of the Order of the Red Men, it did not mean you were Native American. It guaranteed you were not. You could not be Native American and be in the Order of the Red Men. It is the irony of the 1900s. You just accept it and move on. So this book, so if you've got symbols on things, if you see the K of P, and you're like, what the heck is K of P? You can look it up. It's the Knights of Pythias. The tribe of Ben-Hur. You guys are from Crawfordsville. There was a fraternal group called the tribe of Ben-Hur. So this book is excellent for that because, again, it just has all of the, I mean, you can get on your internet, but when I'm out in the cemetery, I'd much rather have a book in my hand than this. So again, good for you guys for getting this book. It's an excellent piece. All right, so then pop culture starts to change again. There's a lot of things going on in the world, especially around history and archaeology. Archaeology is just becoming we won't call it a science yet, but it's just becoming a field of occupation for people. And so they're finding things in Rome and Italy and Greece and things like that and digging up things. And so things are being reported in the newspapers. So there's a lot of hot topics. So Greek stuff, Greek architecture becomes popular again. And you start to see that in cemeteries and the tombstones. And so you just start to see some things that are very old worldly, but a very new tombstone. So this is a sarcophagus. Sarcophagus is actually an Egyptian word. It means flesh eater, and it's because the body was put in there and it was supposed to be caustic. Now this guy is not in here, he's in the ground. This whole thing is the tombstone. Shelbyville, Indiana though. It's a spectacular piece. It's a spectacular, there's some of these, I mean, he just liked Greek stuff. It was cool. I was probably reading it in the paper and seeing things about it, and it just became fun. Then the other thing that happens, it has to do with, again, more archaeology. You get King's Tut's tomb. During the 1700s, when Napoleon was trying to conquer the world and was in Egypt, he brought artists with him, and so before his soldiers did some damage to some of the pieces, he allowed them to be drawn. And so some of these pieces were starting to be republished, starting in about the 1820s, 1830s, you start seeing things in the newspapers. And so you're in Greencastle or Newcastle or wherever castle you're in, and you're reading these papers about, the pyramids and things like that. And so they become popular in cemeteries. And so you get some spectacular Egyptian-themed pieces. Now, this does not mean that these people believed in Egyptian gods. It was just a cool thing to have on your tombstone.
Where was that?
Huh? This one's actually in Italy. So it's like my perfect example. But this one's in Vincennes, Indiana. And so, no, I'm sorry, not Vincennes, Terre Haute. This is in Terre Haute. And so right there is the winged serpent orb. It's a Catholic cemetery. He's not saying he believes in the Egyptian gods. It's just a cool thing to have on your tombstone. And then these also became very popular. And this is because, so starting in the 1820s, we start to figure out, all right, we need to honor our first president. How are we going to honor George Washington? Competition for the artists. They raise money. The Civil War happens, so we stop the raising money. We go back after the Civil War, finish raising the money, start the construction. So for a long time, people were seeing this as a symbol of how we honor the great men in our society. And then became how we honor the great men in your society, in your community. So even in small towns, the most important guy, the doctor or whoever, might have a tombstone that looks like this. The obelisk is a very Egyptian piece. But because of George Washington and how we honored him with Washington Monument, that has now become our symbol of how we honor the great men in our community. All right, then we get mausoleums. So early mausoleums, these are family mausoleums. So everybody in there is associated somehow with the family. They could be in the ground, they could be in the walls. I've seen stacks, just a variety of different ways. But then about 1910, there's a change. Up in Ohio, in northern Ohio, there's a company that comes up with the community mausoleum. And they start selling to cemeteries and to communities the design plans, the architecture plans for these community mausoleums. So you're a small cemetery and you're out of space, but how many spots you could get in here. And so you start looking, they all look exactly alike because they're the same architecture plans that they're using. And so because this place was in northern Ohio and their salesman came across to Indiana, we get a lot of these in northern Indiana. I've seen them as far south as Seymour has a early community mausoleum. But the mausoleums that we have today are community mausoleums. That's just kind of what they've become. This one's also in Shelbyville. You've got to go back home. All right, and then we get today. Today, it's not about religion, it's not about pop culture, it's about me, and what I want you to know about me. And so stones have become very personalized. And so, Ursays, I don't know if you're a Colts fan or not, but they are the owners of the Indianapolis Colts. So the only thing on this man's tombstone is his name and the logo of the Colts. But it's not just the rich who do this. I do not know the Henslers, but I know so much about the Henslers. Laser, which means it's a computer program. And so the computer programs are so sophisticated today, and the lasers are, is that you can actually get them in color too, so it looks like they've been painted on. We don't know how long these are going to last though, because of how deep the cut is or is not. So it's going to be interesting for us as historians and cemetery advocates in 50 years from now, what this looks like. I need to go back and check out the Henslers and see what the stone looks like and see how much is it faded or not faded, things like that. All right, let me get into some things that have nothing to do with the dead, but it's really about the living. So, Sarah Ann Watson, W-A-T-S-O. I did not plan for the N, so I'll put it up there. She departed July, or was born July 12th. I'll put the TH in there. Typos. So the stone carver made no money by throwing this away. It's kind of tough to backspace when you're hand carving it. This also tells me that probably the family couldn't read, because I would not accept that, because I can read. But if you can't read, but also you're a pioneer in 1841, reading is not high on your priority, putting crops in the ground is high on your priority. So we can understand that. So I'll give the 1841 people, I'll give them that. The 1890s people, in my father's house, White House can't be on the same line, I don't know. Are many mansions, but and spell mansion. Again, I love the typos. It's just a fun little thing as you're going to the cemetery to look for something a little different. Now, the stone carver is going to sign his work. I say it's him, it's usually men, it's not great. Sign his work, And it's for twofold, and this should be standing upright, so it hit lower right-hand corner, but it could be on any sides of it. Sign his work for a couple of reasons. One, he's an artist, and he's gonna sign his work. And two, it's advertisement. Because if I'm going out to see Grandma's grave, and I see the one next to it, I'm like, oh, that's a pretty font that he's using. Then I can go into town and find Sherman, and Sherman maybe can do my husband's stone, things like that. So definitely looking for the stone carvers. Is a huge thing, especially early on, because it's going to be very local people and not something that was bought from the warehouse kind of a thing. One of the big people who advertised themselves a lot was the American White Bronze Company. There was a white bronze is also zinc. This is metal. They are found in Chicago. There's Detroit. There's one in Connecticut. So we have a lot of these in Indiana. It has got a baby blue tint to it. So if you're looking across the cemetery with all the white limestone and marble and something looks powder blue, it is zinc, probably a zinc. People call them zinkies. If you go up and you tap on it, it's hollow, it's cast metal. And so you ordered this. You could order it online, or not online, you could order it through a catalog, and then it would come in on the train. These pieces here, you can see that you can remove them, so I could change them out if I wanted to. So what came is the name, and then I would customize it with these. But you can also find these in Mississippi. This is, McCoy is my fourth great grandfather, my father's life. He would not get out of the way, so. But yeah, so they came down on the train, and it was easy and cheap. They were advertised as inexpensive. But who wants to be seen as cheap during your loved one's last time? So they did not do very well. But I love them because you can read them.
Oh, they're perfect.
They're perfect, yes. Unless they are vandalized, you can read everything about them. Unlike limestone, which is just a hot mess. So we all wish it was in whetstone or zinc, but you know. All right, so as I end my time here, you will do this. You're gonna now walk through cemeteries and see funny things and think, I need to send this to Jeanie. And this is what somebody did. I have not been to this. This is actually in Illinois. I have not been to this site yet, but you can see that it says her humor lives on. So when we get up close to this, her time's expired. And so has mine. So I hope this gives you just a little sense of some more things you can look at besides birth dates, death dates, things like that in the cemetery. So I will open it up for questions, comments. Yeah.
Comment, all you need to do is drive through Bedford and from the highway see a cemetery, and you know you're in a special area
I agree.
for cemetery.
We have a new director of DNR. He's been director for maybe 2 years, and he's from Bedford, and he is on their cemetery board. And so I am so happy to have a director who not just gets cemeteries, he loves cemeteries. And so not only is he on a cemetery board, but he's on a cemetery board with one of the most magnificent cemeteries in the state. So I have been very lucky the past 2 years that with our new director of DNR, that he likes what I do. It's like, awesome. Did you have a question? Or did you just?
No, we were talking about
Okay.
the Greencastle Cemetery. She
Yes.
shared that it's south of town on the right. On the right?
On the west side.
On the west side. Well, I don't know what.
Yeah.
what
That side.
But yeah, she said it's really cool.
Oh, there's some amazing pieces.
I was trying to think, there's kind of a special area there, is that a Civil War or?
I'd have to go back through and see. I haven't been to the Greencastle one in a while, so I'd
Well,
have
what
to.
happened was they were working on the high school, redoing some of the stuff, and the guy that was there had just done a lot of renovation at the Greencastle Cemetery. So there's nothing like a trip with your husband, as you know, through the cemetery. It was really cool.
You need to stare at Shelbyville.
And he can tell you all the stories.
Did you have a question? Oh.
This is Darlington.
Oh, Darlington, yes. Most that's spectacular. So she's got a basin, they've got gates to heaven. So family cemetery or family stone?
Well, I have Maxwell's from Darlington, but I was in the cemetery, I'm like, that's so cool.
It's a granite one. It's got to get it. It's just a lot of symbols going on there. Yes.
Yeah, so I thought that was
Yeah.
very interesting, because I'm a cemetery person that loves to go visit
Yep.
any old, wherever, Mooney.
Whether they're related to me or not, I'm gonna go in them. Yeah.
And I take pictures.
Yep.
Look from later.
Yes, ma'am.
There's a big cemetery in Terre Haute, it's on Highway 40 going east.
Mhm.
I don't remember the name of the darn
Is
thing.
it Highland?
No, the Highland Cemetery is on Highway 41, across from Indiana State.
Yeah,
But this one, I don't remember. Anyway, there is a section in there that must be Jewish because they got rocks on top of the tombstones.
probably, and I know Terre Haute
And they
has-
also got the, what do you call those plaques on top of the, covers the entire grave,
like a grave cover.
whatever.
Yeah, grave, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, probably.
Coins on stone?
I've seen coins on stones, but that's more of a military thing. And I've seen somebody who said that, like, if you went to boot camp with them, if you served with them, if you served in active combat, or and if they died, it's like penny, nickel, dime, quarter, and that's what that symbolizes.
And that explains the Thorntown Colored Cemetery, because there are 2 Civil War veterans out there.
Okay.
And there are coins on occasion.
Okay. And so in that one, technically, the coin shouldn't be up there because no one probably served with them.
Right.
But you do it as and again, now it's just a symbolic gesture, yes.
The DAR decorates Revolutionary War soldiers at Christmas now, and you can leave a penny on the tombstone that just shows respect and tells any relative that somebody visited. the
Somebody
grave.
cared, yes.
Yeah. Do they still make whetstone or zinc?
You can say zinc, no. Whetstone, you can find just a few carvers who are doing stuff by hand. There's a guy down just outside of Brown County who is doing some hand carving, and I know he's doing limestone. I don't know if he's getting whetstone. Mainly what we use now is granite, and it's usually Vermont granite is the big thing. Part of that is because with the Depression, we wanted to go cheap, we wanted to go easy, and that's why all stones went from like being big and beautiful stuff to on the ground, and that's what it comes from, is that, you know, it just was cheap.
Well, you know, I priced a tombstone that is about 5.5 feet tall and has some carving on it, right? It has like a little house roof that I thought was really cool, and ivy around it. To make it today would have been $19,000.
Yeah, and you think about somebody paying that much at that time. Yeah, that's why
It probably didn't cost nearly that much, but it would have been big money for
for the time period. It's not $19,000, but in those terms of, yes, that's gonna be very expensive. Yes, Jim.
At the Pioneer Farm at the Indiana State Fair, there's a guy in there that you can watch him carve tombstones.
I wonder if that's Casey, because I know Casey's done some stuff with DNR, and we had some things out at Fort Harrison, and he was out there chiseling away and stuff like that. So it is not easy. I tried it once. It is not easy. I mean, just the getting it carved is a hard thing, and then to get it carved correctly is even worse. So, yes, ma'am.
Okay, I've got a couple questions. So when would you say was the approximate era when the granite started?
Granite starts about 1870s. You start seeing it, and part of it's because the train, you can get things shipped in, so it's going to be a little more cheaper. But it really becomes the most dominant stone around the Depression, so the late 20s, 30s.
Okay. Can I show you a picture?
Uh-huh.
That was my second. So this is, I didn't even know, I came from California, but this is in the open cemetery in Montezuma.
Uh-huh.
And it's my great granduncle. Is this the way a base would be made on that?
Yes.
This is, okay.
So her question is, it's granite, and then the bottom, I don't know if that's granite or
See, I
concrete.
didn't know if it was
Right.
like that, and then they added to it.
No, it's,
Okay.
so it was not, I think the bottom is, limestone might be concrete, I have to touch
Okay.
it to see.
Yeah.
And that's not uncommon to have the stone part, it's called the die, D-I-E, so the base is the base, and it's probably limestone, it might be concrete, and then the die piece is actually, granite. And so, yeah, you get that two-colored thing, and that's not uncommon, because the locals would have set that stone. So it what would have been shipped in is the granite piece, and then the locals had to get something to put it on. And so if they know their limestone or if they know how to do their concrete, that's what they're gonna do.
I just wondered.
All right, well, thank you all for coming. My contact information's up there. happy to come back. Another topic I got lots of stuff. We're doing stuff on the Indian school cemeteries and Green Book sites. Those are 2 new projects I'm working on, plus my underground railroad and all that kind of stuff. So that will be a fun one to do. Is the Indian schools that we had 2 Indian school residential schools in Indiana. If you did not know that. So we shipped children from other reservations and just put them in school here. And 22 died for the one school, so we're trying to identify them. So